Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Ruby Gibson, and I'm the developer of Somatic Archaeology and generational brain spotting, and I specialize in doing intergenerational and transgenerational recovery work. And I'm happy to be here today to talk with you and share a few things about my journey and about the development of the work and how it can impact women. So I thought I would begin by sharing with you just a little bit about myself and my own personal journey. I started doing healing and recovery work when I was 13. It wasn't anything that my family was involved in. It was just something that came as a calling to me. And I spent a lot of time just following my own pathway of interests and self-directed types of education. And I studied a lot of things, and I went a lot of places, and nothing that was quite college certified, but it was all really dynamic, more experiential type of work. And throughout this journey, I began to have some really strong spiritual experiences. And one of the things that happened to me is I started having a relationship with what I call my grandmothers. And my grandmothers are a group of women who inspire me and talk to me and guide me. And when I first started feeling them working with me, I knew that there was something important that I had to do, because why else would this group of women gather around me? And the more and more that this journey has gone on, there's been an integration. So it's not so much them and I, it's us. And as I've stepped into that we position, everything has really changed dramatically for me. And I think it's very important to have that conversation about how we integrate our spirituality with our practice or with our work or what we're doing in our life. Because for me, bridging those two together is what has propelled me and given me the power to be authentic with my journey, to stand confidently in what I'm doing, to know that I always have a backup system, and to know that that what is affirming what I'm doing is outside of my own mind and being. You know, that there is a creator, that there is a wisdom to the universe. And this group of women are very powerful, and they're very committed. One day I had a dream, and this will give you a little bit of a flavor of what has guided my life. I had this dream that I was driving to a sweat lodge, and I was driving my car, and sitting next to me was a little grandmother, and in the back seat was a medicine man and his dog. And we were on our way to this ceremony. And we're driving through the town, and the grandmother said, "Granddaughter, I think you should turn here." And I said, "No, grandmother, I know where I'm going. If you just give me a chance, we're late, and I'm going to go the way I know to go." A couple minutes later, she said, "Granddaughter, I really think you should turn here." And I said, "Grandmother, I know what I'm doing. Just please be quiet." And the third time she said, "Okay, I really think we should turn." And I said, "No, I really need to go the way I'm going." And the next thing I know, the road turned. She gave me 3 chances. The road turned into a dirt road and crossed a creek and went up into a park. And there were all these people lying on the ground sunbathing or playing frisbee or whatever. And I looked around and I thought, how did we get here? The medicine man got out of the car. His dog got out of the car. The police showed up and they arrested him for having a dog in the park. And everything just went to chaos. And I looked at the grandmother, and she came over to me and she whispered in my ear, and she said, "The moral of this story, granddaughter, is to always let the grandmothers drive." And so that has been my, I don't know, my journey has been, how do I give up my own sense of entitlement or thinking that I know what's right within my own self, because I'm just one single person with, trying to gather my thoughts and make sense of things, but I don't have all the information. And as I began to realize that they were driving and I was in the vehicle with them, then I switched positions. I'm not in the driver's seat. I'm in the passenger seat. And I want to say that really clearly and out loud, because the journey that's allowed me to take, and the path of unfolding, and the quality of healing that I provide comes from that. The ultimate goal of the work and the body of work that I'm involved in is really to create peace on earth. And I know that might sound a little corny, but it really is at the heart of it. When I first started doing this type of work, I thought, what is it that I really want to do with my life? How can I be of service? Oh, I could help homeless people. I could save the whales. I could do environmental justice. All sorts of things came up to me. But I thought, at its core, what I really want to teach people is how to respect themselves. Because if I respect myself, I'm going to respect you. And if you respect yourself, you're going to respect the other people around you. And if a whole group of people respects themselves, they're going to respect Mother Earth. And when they start to respect Mother Earth, then the circle of life feels fulfilled. And everyone is caring about everyone else. And so that's the goal. If you can think of maybe a platform that we're standing on as we think about generational healing, it's how do we recreate respect? Not only in the people who've come before us, but in the next generations. So we look 7 generations behind us. We look 7 generations forward. So we look through this 14 generational lens of cause and effect, of what are those things that have happened before us that have made us be the person that we are? And how are we influencing our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren? That's the circle of life. If there's respect for life as a great gift that we've been given to play out our dreams, to play out our creations, then, we're in the right place. But once we stop respecting that, we lose sight of why we're really here. So if we look at this through the lens of women, we say that, all women are born with all of their eggs. So we don't, like men, they reproduce sperm, every day. But as women, we don't. We have all of our eggs. So when I was in my mother's womb as an egg, she was in her mother's womb. So we can say that we were all incubated in our grandmother's womb, because as my mother being birthed there, she already had all those eggs in her. And I, as an embryo in her womb, already had all of those eggs in me. So we can scientifically maybe, or genetically, track the relationship between grandmother and mother, daughter and granddaughter. And that gives, that's a generation. That can be a generation, not just grandmother to or mother to daughter, but let's widen the scope of what we're looking at and just look at it through a bigger lens. And it's really exciting when you do that, because it helps us to understand how we're connected. So if our first experience of life was in our grandmother's womb, then start to think back about what were some of her experiences, especially in our maternal lineage, our mother's mother. What were some of the experiences she had? Did she immigrate? Is she born in this country? What were some of the struggles she was going through? There are so many historical things that have happened, war and famines and depressions and, political struggles and social struggles. What are some of the things that formed how she was and her way of thinking? How did she create the life she had? And how does that influence you? Because sometimes the things that we carry forward are things that are really good. And sometimes the things we carry forward are things that should be probably let go of, or may be distressful or cause an imbalance in our life. And when we recognize that we have a choice about what we can carry, then we become empowered. So we say that trauma itself happens when we lose our voice, our choice, and our power. And healing happens when we reclaim our choice, our voice, and our power. And so through this process of awareness and recognition of how we're influenced, it creates a sense of empowerment in us. And we're actually giving voice to the struggles that our grandmother had that maybe she couldn't resolve. You know, as women in this century, we have so many more things available to us to be able to heal and to speak out loud and to feel empowered. And that helps us to be able to fulfill maybe some of the dreams that our elders before us weren't able to have. And so, you know, sometimes we want to be disconnected from our family, but really, if you can get over and look through whatever the maybe abuse or addiction or detrimental experiences of your childhood and your family and really see the truth that goes through, that truth is called survival. And people will do many things to adapt. It's pretty fascinating the way that we will sometimes shame the people before us, thinking that they are the ones who created this miserable life that we're living. But it's really them who have been fighting each and every day of their life in order to have offspring, in order to give life to their children. And maybe they didn't do it perfect. And if we can feel those imperfections in ourselves and tend to them, we not only mend ourselves, but we mend those who come before us. Because there's no separation, really. It's part of the, as Dan Siegel says, the neurobiology of we. We're all connected, whether we want to be or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And then as I mend those things that my grandmother passed to me, my daughter experiences the benefits, and her children experience the benefits. And then we create an awareness, like links of a chain. We're all bound together, for better or worse. How do we find the best in that? We can change. And that's really what somatic archaeology is about change. Somatic archaeology was developed by myself, I think back in the early 90s. And the idea or the words don't really go along too well, but somatic refers to the body and archaeology to the way in which we can excavate our body. So I consider the body a living library. We have so much information inside of us. And most people think that our body's designed to carry our head around, but really the information isn't here. The information is in our heart, it's in our lungs, it's in our belly, it's in our bones, it's in our cells. That's the idea about being able to excavate what it is. So if we have a lot of stress, we may have to kind of clear some of that out. It's like finding an area in your body, and I would invite you to do this. If there's an area in your body where you experience chronic pain or repetitive injury or anxiety or stress, then that place in your body is the keeper of a story. It's the keeper of something, and we want to excavate it, right? Maybe you've tried other things to solve this problem, but if you can excavate it and find out what's in there, what's at the root of that repetitive process, then what we do is we decide where it is and kind of clear the excavation point, just like you would if you were going to excavate the earth and look for information about your ancestors or historical cultures. You find the location, you start to clean it up, identify where you want to dig, and then you start digging. And the more you dig, the more that you uncover. That you might find things that you didn't think you would find, or you might find old structures that are no longer suitable. And if we do that same thing in our body, and we identify where we're holding something or where there's something archaic that's been living inside of us that informs us, maybe drives us, maybe holds us back, those types of things our body will speak of. But our body doesn't speak in language, English, Spanish, French. Our body speaks in sensation. And so we're looking for sensation to be able to give the symbols, the qualities that reflect specifically to us what it is that information is about. Because we're all wired to be able to identify it, but we have to go there. We have to dig and we have to pay attention and really get attuned to that place. And as we do so, It will open like a flower and reveal so much information to you about yourself and how you've been managing every day, how you've been holding on to the patterns that you've inherited, how you're adapting to stress in your life. There can be so many things, so much beauty, so much creativity. But if we have a lot of suffering that we've experienced and it's layered on top of that, we have to clear some of that suffering away, because there's maybe this whole body of information that comes up that illuminates our mind. So we work with a bottom-up neurophysiology. This process has been field tested for, I guess about 25 years. And we've had remarkable success in a number of ways. I put some of the testimonials and some of the stories in a book that I wrote about it. It's called My Body, My Earth, The Practice of Somatic Archaeology. We had a copy here. So these are available on Amazon. You can get them wherever you shop online for books. It's talks about the practice of somatic archaeology, the theory of it, and some of the stories of people who have had incurable diseases or have had chronic patterns of stress or pain or addiction, and how they've been able to recover by unearthing the roots, not just simply cutting it off at ground level, but really digging in and pulling up the roots. What's the cause and effect? What's the true cause that is creating this effect? Maybe it's many generations removed. Maybe it's one generation removed. Only your body knows. Your mind doesn't have that information. So when we go to our mind to ask questions about where we've been and how we're influenced, it's much like a dog chasing its tail. We just keep going around and around the same subject. When we go to our body, we can actually explore the content that we're holding and ways in which we want to reorganize or clean house so that we can have a different experience with ourselves. We talk about our body as a house, like this is the living room, the attic's up here and the basement's down here. Sometimes people don't want to go to the basement. They'd rather just stay in the living room. That may be a comfort zone. But as we begin to explore maybe some of the shadows inside of us, or some of the places where we're holding darkness, those can be extremely creative and rich, even though they might be difficult to face. But it's finding the fullness of who you are and getting to know yourself that's the true beauty of it. And that I have taken this process and myself through it for many years, and it has really revealed so many things about myself that I didn't know. And through that process of bringing that subconscious information up into my consciousness, I can make sense of it, and I feel more stable, and I feel like I understand myself better, and I know how to move in the world. And that's been part of the gift that these grandmothers have brought, is this teaching. It came in very specific forms, and it's been practiced, and I was able to receive my doctorate and research somatic archaeology. So I was able to research my own work and come out with some really wonderful results. And it's been a very exciting journey for me to move from this inspired spiritual connection to being able to manifest this dream that these grandmothers have been dreaming through me. I feel like a conduit of power, and it's coming to fruition. Our nonprofit group has just received a grant. We're opening a historical trauma research and recovery center in Rapid City, South Dakota in July. We're going to be specifically working with tribal communities and empowering women to become historical trauma educators. Because taking this body of work into a culture creates a whole different experience. And my ancestry and my spirituality and belief is Lakota. And so I feel very strongly bound to the community, to their spiritual health, and to ways in which I can support all of that. So when I started that wasn't necessarily the goal, but as this grew, I knew that that's where I would land. I didn't know how, and my journey to that place was not a straight line. It was like a winding river. It took me a long time, but I finally reached there because I believed in myself and I believed in what I was doing, and I respected myself and I respected the grandmothers and I respected Mother Earth. And I raised 3 children, and I had my own experience and my own unfolding. And I have a wonderful mother myself and a wonderful grandmother. So, there was a lot of strength that was given to me. And so I've used that in a lot of ways in order to bring this body of work and this knowledge to a stage of flowering. So a seed was planted. I've nurtured it for many years. And it's bloomed into a possibility that I think all along part of me knew I was going, but I didn't realize it till I got there that I could finally celebrate a success. It's just taken a lot of years of birthing and maturing. And it's really that maturation process that when you get to know yourself really well, when you identify your spiritual abilities and identify your spiritual self, that's maturity. That's really growing up when you take your creative power into your own hands and use it for the good of others. And I feel so blessed to be able to have this life and be able to be attentive to it and to have the freedom as a woman to be able to express myself and without fear of being judged or having social problems with it. So I enjoy being able to speak where my grandmother maybe had not been able to speak. And, it's a beautiful gift. And there's a lot to share. I feel like we've reached a peak in being able to receive a grant and have this work acknowledged as the beautiful work that it is. But we've just reached a plateau, and there's so much more to do with it. And we just invite you as a community to join into this generational healing movement that, when I started 30 years ago, was not very many people were interested. But now there's a lot of people who have finally said, oh, this is a value, this is important. We need to look back so that we know how we're moving forward. And we need to do that individually so that we can free ourselves from our suffering, so that we can support other people to do that. And we can hopefully move forward as a culture, because creating peace on earth is about starting with ourselves and creating peace in here. And I invite you to do that. It's all around you. Look out in the earth. There's harmony everywhere. Just let that in and see what happens. So I invite you to become part of this generational movement that's happening all around the world. There are so many people who are finally finding the wisdom of looking back so that they can create a different future, not only for ourselves and for our families and our children, but for the world as a whole. We spend a lot of time working in other countries and different cultures, and a couple of the places that I've worked that have been most important, and I want to share this with you so you get a little bit of a flavor of how you can take this body of work called Somatic Archaeology, where you're looking to create peace inside so that you can manifest that sense of peace on earth. It has to begin with us, but sometimes the culture that we're in will influence that. We may not be able to find true peace in our heart if the people around us are struggling so much. So I train in Bucharest, Romania, and there's a lot of people there who are suffering from post-communist social trauma. And, there's a loyalty to those who have come before us and the struggles that they've had, and how we're so determined to live that out, to hold their secrets and to hold their survival and to eat the same way that they did. And, life is changing so fast that we have to be able to adapt, not by losing the beauty of all of that information and all of the great and amazing things and how our families have survived so many challenges. but to be able to really find the truth in there. Every perpetrator was once a victim. And to be able to look at generational healing through that lens, where we develop a sense of compassion and benevolence for the people who've come before us, who maybe had struggles and challenges that we can't even imagine, that were so much more intense than what we're experiencing now. That really helps us to release the anger or the resentment that we have, or the fear that we have of making contact with the darkness or the shadow sides of our family. And that information is not always passed forward in story. It comes through an epigenetic process. It comes through a transfer of behavior and ways of thinking and ways of living. In Spain, when I trained there, we work with in the 1940s, there was a civil war in Spain. And so we work with how has that affected all of the communities, especially for therapists, to help them recognize that if all their clients are working with this similar trauma, and the impact of it, how it shows up relationally for people and emotionally, we're really good holders. Our bodies are really good holders of information, and it can be challenging to let things go, especially the things that are familiar. But I really invite you to step into your own power and be able to identify what it is that you're carrying forward, whether it's good for you and it's good for your family, it's good for your community, it's good for the earth. Sometimes our backpack can get pretty heavy with things that we've been given to carry. But just remember, you always have a choice. And it's that freedom of choice that allows us to find peace inside. Because most of us are distressed because we have a conflict of some sort. Maybe it's a moral conflict. Maybe it's a biological conflict. Maybe it's a spiritual conflict. Maybe something just doesn't feel right. If we can address what conflicts us inside and find peace in our heart and be able to connect with our spiritual power, then, we are able to move forward. We can find ways of being that maybe our ancestors hadn't even thought about. And in that way, we honor them. It isn't a betrayal to change. Change is what happens every single day. So I invite you to get with that flow, to feel what really wants to be expressed inside of you, and to tend to those conflicts that you're holding. Because when you free yourself of them, then you can really live. You can have a beautiful life, and you can have your dreams come true. And I think my journey has proved that to me. I'm not just speaking those words, but I've experienced it myself. But I've been a very good digger, and I've dug really deep inside of myself. And I'm happy to say that it works. And so I hope that you can find that peace in your heart. And if this process of generational healing is one that calls to you, I invite you to join the movement. Thank you.